They say a person's final words reveal a lot about their true character, their hopes, their fears, their undying love. What can we learn from the final words of Jesus? As he was led to the cross, where he would hang in unimaginable agony, his last words before giving up his spirit were not of bitterness or defeat, but of forgiveness, redemption, and trust in the one who sent him. Through these words, we will discover the unparalleled depth of Jesus' character, his unwavering commitment to humanity, and his profound love for the lost that he came to seek and save. These are his final moments. These are his famous last words.
Last week, you may remember, was Daylight Savings Time Sunday, and so our attendance at this service was a little lighter than usual. I mean, no shade by this, but I do want to tell you a little bit about some of the things we talked about last week, just to make sure that everyone is up to date. This sign that you see above my shoulder says invite on it, and it's an invitation to you all, a part of Crossroads, to remember that we can and should be inviting people to Crossroads or to church in general. And so Easter is coming up, and it is such a culturally relevant and easy time to invite friends. And so my hope is that there's someone in your life, a coworker, a neighbor, a relative, who you really think could use community, that could use the story of Jesus, that could use a positive, uplifting message and reminder that lives can change through what Jesus has done. And we've put this banner upstairs in the gathering place. And what I would love for you to do is to go up there and write a name of someone you can invite to church on Easter Sunday. Now, one of the things that drives me crazy about Maryland is that spring break is the week of Easter. And so I know there are a lot of people who go on spring break vacation. And so it's possible that you might think to yourself, oh, I would invite my friend, but I'm going to be in Florida. Now, that is a convenient excuse, I'll give you that. But I would also like to point out that you can invite your friend any Sunday of the year. It doesn't just have to be Easter. And so even if you're not going to be here for Easter, if there's someone that you think that God might have you invite, we would love to have you write their name down, and it'll give the church an ability to pray for these names as well. I know I walk by it during the week, and I pray by name for the people whose names have been written up there, that God would soften their heart and open them up to an invitation. We also have up there little cards, just about postcard size, with all of the information of Easter weekend, all the things that are happening, which make an invite even easier. You can just take some of those, and it has all the information right there. And so you look prepared, you look like you know all the answers, and it really helps you with that invite moment. And so if you would, after service, go upstairs. There are markers right there, and write down the names of the people that you might want to be inviting to church for Easter Sunday morning. Well, this week we're continuing on in our sermon series, Famous Last Words. And as I was thinking about the famous last words, I was also thinking about the movie Frozen this week. I was thinking about it because Mount Hebron, where my daughters go to school, is doing Frozen, and I went and saw it last night. That show, that story, is a pretty important one to my family because my kids were like 5 and 3 when it came out. This is like when I'm an old man and I think about the stories that dominated my children's life. Frozen will be one of those things. And I actually liked Frozen, even though it's a girly movie. Right? I don't know, if you had sons, Frozen may not have dominated your house. But I had daughters, and we watched Frozen, let me tell you. And the reason I like Frozen, very specifically, is because I'm a little worried about spoiler alerts here for a second. So if you've somehow escaped Frozen for the last 15 years, close your ears. I can't imagine you've escaped it, but spoiler alert. What I love about Frozen is that the resolution is all along, they talk about true love, true love, true love. And I'm like, oh, great, here we go, another kiss. And it gets to the end and it's not a kiss. It's not even romantic. It's a sister puts her life on the line for another sister. And true love is sacrifice for someone that you love. And when I watched that, I was like, oh my gosh, finally Disney gets it. It doesn't have to be romantic and kissy all the time. I was so excited about that when I first saw the movie. But also, like I was thinking about this because in some ways there's some real strong metaphor to the story of Jesus as well. That Jesus puts his life on the line as an act of true love. And I do kind of feel like the youth pastor meme in doing this, like my youth pastor says, do you know the other guy who gave his life so that someone could be saved? I get that. But still, there is this metaphor in it that I think is so great. And today's text is really one of those moments where we begin to see just how much Jesus sacrificed and suffered so that he would take on the curse of death so that we wouldn't have to. The line in which Jesus says today in our text is perhaps his most famous of all. Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" We really dig into the cost of the crucifixion when we come to this line. We experience his agony, his pain, his aloneness, his cursedness when we hear him say these words. And so I'm going to invite you, if you would, to stand with me as we read the text in which Jesus says this today. Matthew chapter 27, verses 45 to 50. If you would follow along, the words are on the screen. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah!" Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. I like this artistic picture of the cross. I'm not real sure why Vincent van Gogh has the front row seat to the crucifixion, but I appreciate seeing the crowd gathered around, the nakedness, the shame of Jesus, the pain of Jesus, the crowd not helping, but instead the crowd mocking. This text that we read today, Jesus saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" can be seen in this text. This does not appear to be a person who's winning at life. Without the context of knowing that this is the Son of God, we might even look upon a picture like this and say, yeah, that is a person who's forsaken by God. How could God possibly be on that person's side? Those are bad circumstances. This saying that we read today draws scrutiny from many. It draws intrigue from others. There's a lot of confusion in it, to be fair. If you know anything about Christian theology at all, you've heard about the Trinity, about how God is one God. And within this one God, there are 3 persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. And at no point are any of these 3 distinct from the other. They are persons of one God. But this saying is complicated if that's the case. How exactly are we meant to rationalize that the second person of the Trinity, the Son, is accusing the first person of the Trinity, the Father, of forsaking him? How can this even be done if this is one God? Well, first of all, let me say this. God is different than you and I. We often want to ascribe the logic of humanity upon the logic of God. We want God to be like us in that we can finally make sense of God and finally draw a circle and say, look, inside of this is God. This is who God is. I understand it. I grasp it. I'm in charge now. I get it. But God does not exist within our categories. We, in our human logic, try to make things make sense all the time. God is not going to make sense. God is far more free and far larger than our human capacity can begin to understand. Now that said, I do want to try and make some sense out of what's happening here today. God, who is different than us, and thanks be to God that he is different than us because we've seen just how little human logic can save us, right? So we need a different logic. We need a different person. We need a different spirit. We need something different to save us. And we begin to see this differentness in this text today. Because we hear Jesus say, my God, why have you forsaken me? And we immediately begin to think, where is God? Has God turned his back on Jesus? Is this part of some larger plan? Is God being kind of mean? What is going on here? But we can begin to piece this together by taking a journey through Scripture and seeing exactly what it is Jesus is doing. First of all, the first thing I want you to see is that in saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? There's a good chance that our American English ears can't quite hear that Jesus might be singing. Singing, you say? Well, you know, in the Old Testament, there's a book of 150 Psalms, and that was the psalm book, or the song book of the Jewish people. They would grow up singing those songs and learning their theology by singing these songs of acts of praise. And most people think that Jesus was singing one of those psalms, or at least quoting one of those psalms, when he says this. We're going to look at Psalm 22. Chances are you've heard Psalm 23 before. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down by still, right? The one right before it, Psalm 22, has these exact words in it. And rather than reading the whole psalm, I'm going to take you through a quick journey of that psalm. It begins, verse 1, by saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Well, that's interesting. So, these gospels that we get were written on scrolls, handwritten. They're expensive to put together. So, chances are, the author of Matthew was telling his very Jewish audience that Jesus was singing this psalm without having to write out the entire psalm because all of the people receiving it know this psalm. It's kind of like if I made an allusion to some song we all know, like Thriller or Gangnam Style. You would all know what I was talking about right away. I wouldn't have to quote the whole song to you. You would immediately know. And so it is this audience immediately knew as well. My God, why have you forsaken me? That's the psalm. And so it carries on. It says, why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer by night. But I find no rest. Now, that's still pretty bleak, right? But let's move on and begin to see what else happens in Psalm 22. So we move on to verse 6 to 8. It says, but I am worn and not a man. I am a worm and not a man. Scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Now, is this starting to sound familiar about how the crucifixion scene is painted for us? All around, there are people who despise Jesus, who are beginning to insult him and to tell him that he ought to call upon angels to take him down from the cross if he really is the Messiah, like he claims he is. And so you're beginning to see, as the psalm moves forward and takes shape, that it's beginning to look a lot like the crucifixion scene. And so we can really start tying together what Jesus is singing. Now move on a little further to verses 16 to 18. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Now, if you know the story of Jesus' crucifixion, all the more the bells should be going off in your head. They did that. They took his clothes off. They tore them. They cast lots over them. His hands and his feet are pierced because he's nailed to the cross. This does sound like what's happening to Jesus. And so Jesus is singing a psalm that is deeply appropriate to the moment he finds himself in. Let's keep moving in the psalm. Verse 24. But this is really where the psalm begins to turn. So we have this reality, and then we get to verse 24. All along, it seems like such bad news. This person is forsaken by God. It seems like God has ignored him. It seems like God is just allowing him to be mocked and made fun of. But then the chapter turns right here. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but he has listened to his cry for help. He has not turned his face. He has not ignored. God has drawn near to the suffering of the afflicted one. And so even though Jesus is saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? The psalm is saying he's not forsaken. That in the suffering, in the pain, in the agony, God is still near and God is still at work, even though our assumption is that when agony is taking over the body of a human being, our assumption is that God is not helping. But the psalm here is saying, no, God is near. God does see. God is showing up. He's not fixing the suffering, but he's still present. And the consequence of God's presence in the suffering is brought to a conclusion in the psalm. These are the last verses of the psalm. As a result of all that's happened, this is the end of the psalm. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it. And so already Jesus, in referencing this psalm, is saying, I am suffering, but God is in my suffering, and salvation both for those alive, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born will come out of this suffering. God has not turned his back on Jesus, but God is using this suffering to bring about salvation through Jesus. And in all of his forsakenness, in all of his suffering, in all of his pain, Jesus is recognizing that God can do something powerful through his suffering. So Jesus experiences forsakenness. Forsaken is the definition, just so we're all on the same page, means completely abandoned, deserted, or left alone. And he certainly is that. No one is helping him. He is doing this on his own accord, through his own strength, what little is left. He's doing it on his own. It's painful. It's lonely. It's unfair. But Jesus never takes the easy route to salvation. And in never taking the easy route to salvation, he endures pain and loneliness and agony that in the process he himself saves. And so when you experience forsakenness, when you experience loneliness, when you experience pain unimaginable, when you experience agony. Jesus has swallowed that up in himself as well. He does not just save people who's had it easy, but he has entered into the sort of agony and pain and loneliness that we experience. And in his journey to this loneliness, this pain and agony, he saves those who have experienced forsakenness. How could Jesus save that which he has not hallowed or experienced or felt? You yourself may come here today and you could spell out forsakenness in far more clear terms than I have, because you've felt it, you've known it, you've experienced it. You have felt alone, you have felt mocked, you have felt made fun of, you have felt pain. And the good news of this text is that Jesus has as well. And he can show up in your pain and your loneliness and say, you are not alone. I've been here too. And I've saved even this. What an incredible testimony of salvation that is. If you've experienced forsakenness, you yourself can say, Jesus saves this as well. So why can we say this? Why can we say that Jesus has experienced forsakenness? Are we just giving this lip service? Is this just something that Jesus says so that he can say it and he could reach out to you in salvation? Well, no, the scripture teaches us what his forsakenness looks like and what the assumptions of the moment in time were that spell out for us what forsakenness looks like. Let's look at Galatians chapter 3 if we can. As Paul is writing to the Galatian church, he's explaining to us what it is that Jesus endured socially, like what the understanding was, theologically, what the understanding was, so that we can see what this forsakenness really looked like to the people of this moment in time. Let's read this together, verses 10 to 14. For all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse. As it is written, cursed is everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of law. That, my friends, is bad news for all of us. Clearly, no one who relies on the law is justified before God, because the righteous will live by faith. The law is not based on faith. On the contrary, it says the person who does these things will live by them. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles, that's us, through Christ Jesus, so that by faith we might receive the promise of the Spirit. And so here Paul is saying that Jesus has become a curse. He has become a curse. And this is from Deuteronomy. He's not making this up either. He's quoting the literal law that he's talking about. This is what Deuteronomy said. If someone guilty of a capital offense is put to death and their body is exposed on a pole, you might not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it that same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land of the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And so the literal law says anyone who is hung on a pole is cursed by God. And again, this becomes confusing to our categories. Why is God cursing himself? Why would God choose to allow himself to die on a cross, a pole, when the law itself says that is a person who is cursed by God? And what Paul is doing is saying that we are all cursed. We have all sinned. We have all broken the law. We have all avoided doing what God has called us to do and be. We have all fallen short. And when we have all fallen short, we have received a curse. We have become cursed by our own sin. And so what Paul is saying is that Jesus went up on the cross, experienced forsakenness and the curse, so that he could heal them. He could redeem them. How could How could God heal the curse that we are under without taking that curse upon himself and dying? And so, Jesus becomes the cursed one. The curse of sin comes upon him on the cross. And when he dies, the curse dies as well. And when Jesus is taken off this cross, after having said that he's been forsaken, he gets put in a tomb and laid there. And the world believes, his followers believe, the powers that be that put him on the cross believe he is dead and he is a problem no more. But after 3 days, God shows us that Jesus is not forsaken, that God has been present. He reaches into the tomb, brings Jesus to life, and the curse remains dead in the tomb, and Jesus emerges as a way out of the curse for all of us. He has entered into the worst of the worst. He's made that holy and hallowed, but he's left the curse in the grave and emerged with new life, and this life is eternal and untaintable and untainted. So, the curse no longer reigns because Jesus took the risk of embodying the curse on the cross and dying with the curse inside of him and upon him. The law says, "Cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree." Anytime we try to just simply be a good person, to follow the law, to do what is right, we fall short. We cannot do it on our own. We know what the curse looks like because we have chosen it time and time again with our own actions. Jesus did not choose it by his actions. He chose to accept the curse because he loves you. And he does not want the curse that you have chosen to define you. So Jesus sees the curse that we are under and takes it upon himself in spite of the fact that he does not deserve it. He climbs up upon the cross on his own accord. He says in the scriptures that he lays down his life. It is not taken from him, but he lays it down for us. He is forsaken because he is alone on the cross. The curse is upon him. He did nothing to deserve it, but you did. I did. But Jesus doesn't want us to suffer the consequences of the curse. He takes it upon himself, hangs on the cross, cursed and forsaken. But fortunately, God is not finished. You see, in this moment, Jesus experiences forsakenness and cursedness. And you might come here today saying, man, the whole world, my whole life feels like forsakenness and cursedness. I can't get out of my own way. It feels like no one is here to help. I'm all alone. I'm experiencing loneliness. Everything I do feels like a mess up. I can't figure out which way is up and which way is down. Life is difficult. Life is pain. I'm struggling. I'm hurting. And what I want you to hear today is that you are not alone, because long before you drew your first breath, the God of the universe entered into the spaces of forsakenness and cursedness so that you won't be alone. And you won't finally have to suffer the consequences of what that might mean in your life. Jesus entered into the curse and entered into forsakenness so that you don't have to remain there. He can save you from being forsaken, and he can save you from being cursed because he entered into those spaces and God redeemed him from those spaces. Jesus does all of this so that he can save those who have been forsaken and cursed. So today, as we close, we've been through this whole series giving out cards of reminders of what Jesus says. There's a piece of artwork on it. It's a keepsake, something that I hope you can put in your car, up in your home, as a reminder of who Jesus is and what he did. And today's saying, as you can see up on the screen, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Those are words that might at points in your life, been comfortable words for you to speak. You might have wondered at a time or again, where is God? Why am I alone? Why isn't God working? And the good news is, the very Son of God felt the same way. At some point, at a moment, Jesus himself felt the same way. But Psalm 22, Galatians 3, they remind us that that was not the end of the story, that God was not far away, even when it felt like God was. That God brought redemption and salvation, even though in the moment, Jesus could genuinely and honestly say, I feel forsaken. But he wasn't, and neither are you. And so today we're going to have some volunteers come up and bring these cards. And this card can be a reminder to you that in your forsakenness, you are not forgotten. In your loneliness, in your curse, in your pain, in your hurt, you are remembered, you are loved, and you are saved. Come and take one of these cards, but also, if there's something stirring in your heart to say, I need more than just a card. I need to experience this salvation. I need to know that this is for me. This is a great time as we sing to come to the altar as well and to kneel before this God and say, you have entered into my forsakenness. You have entered into my curse. Save me from it. Remember me. Draw near to me. And make something beautiful out of this mess. God is faithful to enter into your life and to become your Lord and to bring you salvation today. And so I invite you to stand as we sing this final song. Come and take a card, but also, if you're moved, come and pray. Don't let the moment go. Let's sing together as we close.